Welcome back to The Beat with Ari Melber. We are tracking a breaking story in the transition to the Biden administration. Donald Trump and the Trump administration formally backing down. We got this just moments ago, a formal letter from the General Services Administration. That was the organization inside the federal government that became such a hotbed of controversy when it delayed the activities for the transition to the Biden administration. And as mentioned, the president himself joining in and saying the, quote, initial protocols for President-elect Biden shall be followed and provided for through the federal government. Here is the full new tweet from the president. He mentions the GSA administrator, Emily Murphy, and says he doesn't want her to face any what he calls abuse. Our case strongly continues, he writes in all caps. We'll keep up the work, but he goes on to say, keep up the good fight. Nevertheless, in the best interest of our country, quote, I'm recommending that the team do what needs to be done with regard to initial protocols and have told my team to do the same, end quote. We are joined by Professor Jason Johnson, MSNBC analyst. And Jason, let's be clear on the news, then we could get into whether people think it was late and petty and all the rest. But the news tonight for folks coming home and following this Monday evening is this is the first time, by my count, that Donald Trump has publicly said that he is facilitating and telling his staff as president to facilitate the onboarding of the Biden administration. Jason.
So, yeah, Ari, look, I never want to give the president praise for doing his job and accepting the obvious. It's sort of like giving someone credit for saying today is Monday. But what I do think could be helpful about this, by officially saying he's not going to stand in the way and we can begin the transition, Team Biden can actually begin doing work like looking after national security issues and developing all the information that they'll need in order to put together a COVID plan. So this is important, not because it pats Donald Trump on the back of his head, but because it allows a real functioning government to start beginning their job rather than having to do it the last minute on January 20th.
Yeah, and you're saying something that President-elect Biden referenced last week. A lame duck president in Donald Trump has far less power than an open-ended administration, but he's still the sitting president. And so President-elect Biden had been diplomatic. I think over the end of last week, we saw him dial up the pressure and the rhetoric. Here we are on Monday with it changing. Now, I have the full letter here from the administrator, as mentioned, the GSA administrator, and she makes the argument, she makes the claim that this unusual delay, which we had not seen previously, was not the result of pressure from the president and his unusual denial of the loss, a failure to give a speech or concede, but rather something that she came to of her own independent judgment. Whether that is true or not, people can get into and fact check. It doesn't matter much because this letter marks the end of the obsession over this obscure federal agency, because it was only important in this realm, in this story, Jason, because it had become an unusual delay, a boulder on the path to onboarding the complex process in our government, particularly during the strained work environment, the Zoom work environment of the pandemic, and now that's over.
Yeah, and Ari, here's the thing. This is what I've been saying all along, that there needs to be like a wholesale change. There need to be some very aggressive ideas put forward when Joe Biden gets in office. Because can you think about the fact that the transition of hundreds of jobs and individuals and megabits of information was dependent on one lady complaining and not wanting to do her job? How functional a democracy can we have if one person who happens to have a lousy day, if that person happens to be the president, it's one thing, but one absolutely obscure, unknown government employee basically threw a wrench in the entire process? We cannot allow this kind of thing to happen again, either through mendacity or arrogance or just pure incompetence. And I hope that Joe Biden, when he gets into office, begins to go through this entire administration with a fine-tooth comb and recognize we can't have these sorts of things happening again.
Yeah, and as you say, it's a reminder of all the things that were norms, this word that gets kicked around, right, traditions, but that even though there is a actual legislatively ordained process for the transition, there's funds attached, et cetera, the mechanisms, right, are too open to individual capricious sort of decision-making, which the evidence of how capricious it is that it's just been reversed on a Monday where all of a sudden, no, you get it. And what do they get? I want viewers to understand, and then I give Jason the final word on the big picture. The new letter states, and it's addressed to President-elect, Joe Biden, Mr. Joe Biden. It says the Honorable Joe Biden at the top. You now get $6.3 million as Congress initially intended to further facilitate this transition. Again, that's money from the government for the president-elect, which is a quasi-position, right? Because you're not yet the constitutional commander-in-chief of the United States. But there's millions of dollars there provided precisely so you hit the ground running, which is in the national security and public interest of the nation. Jason, final thought.
Yeah, look, we have spent too long, it's been too long, too wide, too complicated dealing with Trump's ego. We're done with that now. No one's standing in the way now. No one can keep us from having a functional government. And I hope that as soon as Biden gets this cash, hires people, houses are made, and people can get in, that we can function on people who are intelligent. But I also have to say this. If there's one lesson Joe Biden and everybody coming into this administration should learn from this, it's that they can't come in and moderate and play this small. If you have an administration that was willing to gum things up all the way until the last minute, you need to be just as bold in the other direction to take America back, or Trump and Trumpists are going to be back in office in 2 years saying that Joe Biden didn't do enough.
A bigger point there on how this all works. And again, the pressure that was building here. We saw 2 more Republican senators coming out today, for example, pushing Trump on this. We saw the public pressure. We see the problems on the legal side. And all of that amounts to, all of a sudden, Donald Trump deciding, I guess he is just going to post about the fact that someone else is president soon. Jason Johnson, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ari.